Okay, a very warm welcome to everyone here to ISS Inspire Theater. It's very exciting and inspiring to see a full house today, a packed audience on a rainy Friday afternoon. So thank you everyone for coming. It's exciting to see such a great interest in product management as well, very encouraging for us. And thank you as well to our NUS ISS colleagues and of course our partners, GovTech Digital Academy, to bring everyone here together this afternoon. So my name is Scott C. I teach the digital products and platforms practice. So I teach courses around product management here at NUS ISS. Until quite recently, I was in various product management roles across startups and financial services. And we'll be going through a very quick keynote before we start our panel discussion. Okay. So maybe just a quick show of hands over here. How many here are already product managers? Okay, quite a fair number actually already doing product management, right? And how many of you are working in product teams? Like, okay, I think most of you actually, most of you. Okay, um, and I think some of you who did not raise your hands, you may already be doing some kind of product management, but maybe you're not sure. Like, is that really product management? Am I actually doing product or not? What is it to do product? What is it to do product management? Right? So I'll share a story, a quick story. So I recently attended a friend's wedding, and I met friends who I haven't seen for like 10 years. And they asked me, hey, Scott, what are you doing? What have you been up to? And I was like, okay, I was doing product management, and now I teach product management. And then I was faced with blank stare, like question marks. It's like, what does it mean? So they understand what's product, they understand what's management, but when you combine the two words, confusion, like people are confused. What is it about, right? So I also reflected and said, okay, I felt a bit like this meme over here, right? You have many different options that float around what my friends think about product management, what my mom thinks about manager. It's all very, very different, different impressions. So I think there's a lot of misunderstanding, stood roles, right? Product management role is still very misunderstood. So now, before we start the panel discussion, we want to level set and say, role, really, right? What is it? So on the one side, some people say that role, right? Product management, there's the word manager, right? So you call the shots on what to build, what to prioritize. Oh yeah, let's switch. Okay. And then on the other side, you have this troubleshooter, firefighter type of persona for product, right? Like what you do every day is you fight fires, you clean up other people's mess, you clean up your team's mess. So it's like two different extremes and poles. And what, from my experience, the reality is of product management is that it's a bit of both. The reality is somewhere in between these two extremes, right? So it's an in-between role, literally in between, right? Product is hard to pin down because you're in between these three circles, right? Many of you have seen variants of this, I'm sure, right? So you're in between user needs, so the desirability, the business viability, and of course the technological feasibility. Okay? And you are there at this intersection, here in the middle. You're here in the middle to do what? You're here in the middle to discover and deliver product outcomes that balance these three circles. Okay? What does that mean? Like the keywords there, right? Outcomes, discover, and deliver. Right? So by discover, what we mean is you figure out how to build the right thing. And by deliver, what we mean is you build the thing right. Okay? And because you're in the middle as well, a product manager is what we call like a professional gap filler. You fill in the in-between gaps, right? So it's very flexible. You do whatever it takes to fill the gaps because your goal is ultimately not to complete an output, but to increase usage, right? To raise sales, to drive customer satisfaction. So it's all about achieving outcomes, okay? And that's why product management roles have been thriving. I guess that's also why we see a lot of interest in this event, right? Because it's so convenient for companies to have one person. I assign you an outcome, and all you have to do is do whatever it takes to achieve that outcome. If you succeed, everyone's happy. If you fail, there's only one neck to choke, right? Which is your neck, right? So that is a very convenient from a management point of view, right? So that's why we see product management roles thriving, right? We see that over the last few years, there's been a rapid growth in product roles, and we see that it will be a trend over the coming years as well. Okay, but it can get complicated, right? There's a lot of complexity that's involved because we said that product management is about filling gaps, and different organizations can have different gaps to fill between the user, business, and with this, it's all good, right? So you can see in the over the like over and then over the last example, you see that there's a disconnect between the user, the business, and technology, right? So the shapes, right? There's no one size of filling the gaps in between. One product may be this shape, so you as a product manager have to be that shape in order to fill that gap. Or you have to be this. Or sometimes you have to be this shape, right? So that's why it's very, very tricky to what does it take to be a product manager? It's also tricky to say, how do we get a product manager involved within the team as well, right? And the key goal for the product management role is restoring balance to the force, essentially, right? Balancing the three circles, right? Pardon me for the Star Wars meme over there. But this is also a reminder for us not to get too hung up on the titles, right? So there's a lot of titles related to product management. We see product manager, product owner, engagement manager, even a startup CEO. That's what essentially they do. They balance the business, tech, and the user, right? So the key message that we want to emphasize is that product management, the function that balances, that restores balance to the force, is greater than just the product manager title or role, right? So we shouldn't get too hung up on that. Okay? And because this role is about keeping balance in the force, it tends to attract, right? So my former boss used to call our team as like all around athletes, right? Because we all have different starting points. The prevailing impression is that, right? So I am rising in my career as an engineer. Okay, okay. Tech it or leave it. So we have a tech issue. Okay, so the prevailing impression is that product managers tend to come from tech, right? I am rising in my career as an engineer. Now I want to see and cover the big picture, right? So that's from the tech. We also see a lot of people from the business side, right? From business strategy or marketing, and it becomes a very natural transition for them into product, right? And finally, we have people who have experience in user experience or customer success. They have a deep understanding of the user already, so they have that. They bring that advantage into as they transition into the product role, right? So what you have is these varied entry points from different sides of the house with different gaps to fill. And all these complexities open up a lot of questions, right? Is there a set formula on how we break into product? Is there a set template on how what type of profile we should hire as to become a product manager? And is there a set map for us to upskill to become a product manager? Right? So one of the prevailing impressions as well is how crucial are your technical skills, right? Because product management has always had this affinity, historical affinity with the tech industry. So that always becomes a very crucial question. How crucial are tech skills when we bring it into product? And if we say, if we focus on the tech skills, which tech skills should we focus on? Okay? And you have these different perspectives that come up. Like, oh, product managers, we should know programming. We should know how to code, right? You have people who say that. Or at least know how to estimate tech effort, right? Because you're working very closely with engineering teams and development teams. Then on the other extreme, others would argue that no, product management, it's all about soft skills and communication. Some would take the middle ground and say, oh, you have to know analytics at least and know how to run A/B tests. And of course, these days there are now discussions, a lot of discussions that say, oh, product managers, now you should learn how to use AI or even learn AI itself, like develop AI tools, right? So these are some of the questions that we will tackle with the panel today. We have invited these experts who have lived to tell the tale, share their experience on technical skills in product management, basically demystifying a lot of these questions and letting us know which are myths, which are facts, and what do we need as we grow in our product management careers in order to be more technically proficient. Okay, so they will be sharing using their first-hand experience, and that's what we will explore, essentially, right? Should we tech it or leave it? Okay, so with that, we will move on to the panel discussion. Over to you, Doro.
Cool. Thanks, Scott, for setting us up so well. All right. Yeah, another warm welcome to our panelists, of course, and also to our audience. So glad you could join us this afternoon. We'll pick up where you left us. And we basically want to answer 3 questions with the experience of our panel, which is, what are scenarios in which technical skills, technical knowledge can be useful to drive product management outcomes? And then how can we build those skills? Either if we come from technical background already, which ones can we leverage? Or if we don't come from technical background, which ones should we focus on? Or not which ones, but in which scenarios can they really be useful? And then how can I build them? So I'm going to start with you, AJ. Scott, do you have the mic? Yes. Cool. So we'll start with you, AJ. You're currently Principal Product Manager at Zalora. And your background, though, is in software development. You were a software developer for 3 years here at Titansoft. And so we're really curious to know, from your experience, where were you able to leverage those software development skills, that background, that knowledge, when you became a product manager, as you practice product right now?
I mean, when you're starting out in product management, right, the first mountain to conquer is execution, right? And when you're working with engineers day in, day out, there will be a lot of technical jargons thrown at you, right? And definitely the background in software engineering helps me to kind of process those jargons. And second is also earning the respect of the engineers. But it will only help you to move from, let's say, 0 to 0.5, right? But then what Scott shared earlier, if you're not able to fill on those gaps, you can only rely so much on your technical skills. Where my technical skills definitely over the years have helped me, I would broadly categorize as 2 things. One he was mentioning firefighting, which is issues. There is a high P0, P1 open and high intense situation, and you are the one who can work with the team to figure out and paint the picture of what's happening, and that's quite helpful for the team as well because the pressure is so high. So that's where the technical skills definitely come handy, and it has happened a lot of times with me, right? The second is also, I would say, when you're working on a feature, when you're working on a product, um, the team creates these technical docs based on your requirements, etc. But as you know, in the life of a PM, you are doing 10 different things. So your requirements will never be perfect, ever, right? There will always be some things that you will miss. So when you're looking at the technical doc, sometimes you being able to understand what the solution is, the how part, then you can apply your product lens on it, which is looking through, let's say, the data schema, looking at the information architecture. You ask myself, okay, what happens if this happens? Did I think about this scenario? How will it scale? Is it flexible enough? Because right now you think you need this, but you will always try to keep a door open in case you have to pivot, right? And when you're building a feature, you always try to think, okay, if I have to pivot next time, I don't need to take the same amount of time, effort that it took me to get here. So basically applying the product lens on the technical review or the solutioning really helps you to craft a good solution, because as a PM, at the end of the day, you are responsible for a good solution. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So two scenarios,
Two.
basically
Right.
troubleshooting as well as
Right.
crafting the requirements, and you are able to connect dots faster, as
Right.
well as transfer new knowledge and apply to your product, like you
Right.
mentioned, for new technologies. Do you think there's a distinction between how much your theoretical background contributes and your versus your practical experience as a developer?
Theoretical as in college wise?
Yeah, exactly.
Not at all. And not at all. I mean, but to be fair, so I graduated from NTU. I never studied in US, so I don't know. But and I hope NTU folks won't kill me. But I actually didn't study in NTU. So I lived my college life like any teenager would. But in honestly, like I think that time college was also quite behind the curriculum. Like I kid you not, we were being taught about waterfall. And by the time I graduated, I'm like, what is waterfall? Everyone is talking about agile. What is this? Some new technology? I didn't even understand, right? So theory didn't help me. Everything that helped me was on the job.
Because the environment is so fast
Yeah,
paced.
yeah. The environment is so fast paced. I mean, AI has been taught in the college for a long time, but this new product of OpenAI has completely changed the game again, right? I mean, I know, so it keeps on changing. So that's why it's really important to get on the job exposure.
Yep, exposure in that
Yeah.
technical environment
Yep.
being more important. So yeah, you basically two scenarios: the firefighting, the requirements, and all that. So it does sound already like there's a lot of application for that exposure.
Right.
Let me ask you the inverse as well.
Right.
Do you see any downside to being
Oh yeah,
technical?
oh yeah. From my own personal experience and learning, this mistake I used to make was sometimes, for the lack of better word, you become cocky as a PM and you become overconfident. So when you enter into a discussion, you think you have an idea of the solution, and what happens is that you take the focus or the bandwidth of the discussion to your own idea, wherein if you would have allowed the conversation to happen amongst your knowledgeable team, they could have come up with a better solution, right? So this I learned painfully, and now what I practice is that when I go into a discussion, be it feasibility, brainstorming, blah blah blah, I just stay quiet. I am there to answer any why or what questions, and I just listen,
Yeah.
right? And let the discussion foster and reach its own conclusive state. My role is only there to apply that filter lens, whether this would actually work or not with the context that I have.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's definitely a pitfall
Yeah.
if you become too technical.
Yes, to jump into the solutioning
Yeah,
too
yeah,
fast.
yeah,
Okay, and take
yeah,
over roles that are
yeah, yeah,
essentially not
yeah.
yours.
And yeah, I mean, sorry, the point that you said, sometimes that also, what is the right word, kind of creates this blind spot in your head, which is you forget about the why and what. You're just too excited with the solution that you don't connect back to the why and what. And when the adoption is really bad, then it hits you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And do you have any concrete stories or little anecdotes that you want to share with us on those?
For this story, yeah. So when I started product management, it was robotic. It was a flatbread. It was robotics, but powered by IoT. And I remember I was asked to. The app was just to connect the machine to the Wi-Fi. So of course the mandate was bring more use cases to the app, create more engagement, so that people do more things with machine. I came in and I'm like, I had this cool idea of, okay, I'll bring recipes and show in app how to make recipes. And instead of focusing on the content of the recipes, because that robotic was foodware, like making food, uh, I never took a step back and thought about what are actual pain points that I'm trying to solve with those recipes. So I spent like 2 months, this beautiful UI, this fast performing recipe loading, you tap, 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 carousel, everything loads super fast, blah, blah, blah. And I kid you not, the adoption rate was 2%, all the way till down, which is like from viewing carousel to opening up the recipe and actually being staying on the page was 2%.
2% of users manage to go
Yeah,
through the flow.
to like hit my target of the whole thing. And that was like a slap.
Yeah.
And then it hit me that when you started now talking to the users, which I should have done in the first place, it hit me that, wait a minute, my focus was building on this beautiful performance solution, but I never focused on the content, which is people were looking for like a 2-minute recipe or a 5-minute recipe, and all these recipes were complicated, which look beautiful on the app, right? So that's one of the example of how I went head first with the solution rather than taking a step back and thinking about the basics.
Yeah.
And yeah, so that's one of the stories. But there are a lot more, like when you go into the bug fixing, etc. And I have myself thrown the team off track by giving my own ideas.
Yeah.
And that was also a lesson learned. Yeah.
Thanks for sharing. Very
Oh,
relatable, I think, probably for everyone
right.
on the panel. You touched a little bit on, or you described a little bit the product that you actually worked on, and that's a point I would like to build on. Maybe we'll switch to you, Lee, soon for this one. So you are currently a lead product manager at NDI, National Digital Identity. You're working on SingPass, but before that, you were actually also a software developer. You worked for a couple of years in the US and then came back, tech in Asia. That's where you switched as well into product management. And yeah, the question we would like to ask you, do you believe that the type of product perhaps has an influence on the level of technical depth that you can apply that can be useful?
Well, let me put it this way, right? If you think about a user-centric product, right, something that you can see and touch, right, that you use every day, what kind of product is that? Then you think about a platform product, something that's more API gateway or, that serves, engineers instead, right, like GitHub, GitLab, whatever. And then you think about something hardware product, for example, VR or smartwatches and whatnot. What do you think, technically, right, each of these would definitely benefit from you having specific technical expertise, for sure. However, though, all these, as previously mentioned, also can be learned on the job as well. So, like AJ was saying, this takes you to 0.5, right? And what else do you need to bring you to that, one, or to get the outcome that you want? And I really think that, coming with the right attitude, good problem-solving skills, these are really more important. Yeah, so definitely technical skills will really help depending on what kind of product, and the product matters actually.
Yeah.
But definitely other things matter more.
On the type of product, do you have a mental model there, sort of like how core or how central technology is to the core of the product? Does that make a difference?
Yeah, I mean, depending on the product, right? For example, I was talking about for example, if you're building a product like a code repository like GitHub, GitLab, right? Then for sure you need to know how those things work in more specific detail. And of course, as a product manager, it helps if you understand the context when you're in discussion with your engineers and designers, right? But of course, as AJ also shared, you want to give the majority of the authorship, ownership to your knowledgeable team. Yeah. So at some point, right, technical knowledge does not become your main, I guess, superpower. It's about balancing between what the different teams need, making that best decision, and making that consistently over time as well.
Yeah, definitely a point that resonates with many of you, right? The on the job or the just in time sort of learning, like on demand, like whatever the product is based on, you upskill in that area. So let's then hear from you how to actually upskill. So I've got the follow up question for you, very bluntly put: should a product manager know how to code?
Yes, that's a good question, right? For if you are building a very, if you're building a software, it's kind of like a coding software that engineers use, right? Wouldn't it help if you know how to code? But I would say that coding actually, much like any other skill set or muscle that you kind of have and you learn in your daily life, right? For example, speaking, writing, uh, all these teach you very basic concepts. So coding teaches you basic concepts like how data structures work, how logical things can be applied, and all that. So what I think is that all these give you different tools for you to use, right? And lets you apply different thinking approach to how you would solve a problem. And so I think that coding, while not necessary in general, it would equip you with a different set of skills to solve different problems. And so if you are thinking of learning coding, right, I always think it's a good hobby to pick up if you're not, that doesn't need to be your main, breadwinner or whatever, but could be a good skill to pick up, help you think differently.
How often have you read or wrote code since you became a product manager?
Ah, that's a good one, right? Got me over there. But previously in my last role, right, before GovTech, where I was at Tech in Asia, right, when I did transition over from being a software engineer to being a product manager, I actually still had to continue coding, right, at that time, because I didn't have any data analyst or data scientist with me. So who was the one, finding the data that you need about your users, qualitative data? That's yourself, right? Like you were saying, you do all the jobs basically. And so at that time, having SQL knowledge or even being able to dive into the code, answer quick questions about, hey, what's the constant value for the waiting time for this, what's the refresh value and all that. You can go get that really quickly if you know how to code. Yeah.
Makes sense. So we've mentioned troubleshooting as well as connecting dots, so more of the critical thinking skills. But a common assumption is also that if you know how to code or if you have previous technical background, you're able to speak the same language, right? You're able to level. So in your opinion or in your experience, actually, how important is it for successful collaborations within a software development team, product manager to software developer?
AJ touched on this also, that having technical skills gives you probably some sort of respect with engineers, of course. You still have to be a nice person, right? You can't go in there and say, hey, I know everything. Can you all follow what I'm saying? You don't go in like that, right? So, but of course you do it nicely. So having technical skills, that knowledge, whatever product that you're building, right? It lets you speak the same language, which is a common theme that we have talked about today. And however, right, I would also emphasize that the soft skills and a certain finesse and a very outcome-driven approach, right, would be more effective overall. Yeah.
Any stories for us on the collaboration side, especially after you became PM, some friction there or what you mentioned? How did you make it gel well in the end?
I mean, there was a time where in our app where we wanted to rebuild a certain feature, and quite similar story to AJ also, where uh, it was actually displaying static data at first, but we wanted to change it such that we didn't have to touch the front end code every now and then, make it more dynamic so that it could be served by the back end, right? Because you change on one side and then all clients, millions of users change, right? You don't have to wait for them to update any app or versions, right? So during this design, I think we also prioritize tech a bit more. So having the engineers, how do you say, buy in and that they feel like this is worth doing is quite important as well, because you can't be pushing the agenda that I want this to be done the dynamic way, I want it to be done fast, performant, but then are you going to be the one actually doing the work and doing the coding? No, right? So you really want to get that buy-in from engineers, and I think in our process, right, it was quite clear that the engineers enjoyed this also, because engineers typically strive for that kind of excellence, like performance, always up, works all the time, super fast, super nice, clean code, no legacy, stuff like that. So it was, I mean, through this example, right? I mean, you still have to finesse your way in a way, but it was something that we were all proud to deliver eventually.
That's great. Any specific communication tools or processes that you took away from that or that you built later on that you think facilitate this?
Specific tools. Well, not that I can think of now.
AJ, maybe you want to jump in because, in my opinion, you're the master of facilitating communication within your own team. Anything you want to share?
I'm not a master. Dodo's being too kind. Basically, the context is that post-COVID, the game changed, right? Earlier, you could just huddle down in the office, pick up the whiteboard and the marker, and just hash it out. Now you are on the calls, and now we are talking about technical concepts that I don't understand, or I mean, there are so many technical concepts even I don't understand, right? So the process of the tools that comes first is simple. A picture speaks 1,000 words. So pull out a Miro or FigJam or whatever that floats your boat, screen share, and start writing it down. So my calls would be incredibly slow, but way more efficient in the long run, right? So what I would do is basically they are explaining to me a certain data flow. I'm like, wait a minute, okay, I'm putting boxes, circle, arrow, like literally charting out what's happening. And then I will take a step back and look at each of these components and then will ask my questions, right? So visualizing it is the most helpful thing that you can do to collaborate, especially for a technical conversation. And lately, I think the other process that has really helped is really I wanted to say the word force because engineers hate to write, right? I mean, engineers hate to write, right? They would love writing code, but they would hate to write a doc. But if you force the team to write a doc, and you lead by example, you do the same for your stuff. But if you write a doc, that itself gives you a pre-read and you come out with more focused question rather than jumping on a call and then trying to understand everything at once and then also processing at the same time different questions and that's popping up. I mean, our brain is super complex and amazing, but it's not a supercomputer. So you need to kind of space it out, and that's the only way, in my opinion, to work in a remote environment. Yeah.
And how about cadence, for example? How often do you see your team? Do you talk about things? You managed, like, things seemed slow initially, but
So, cadence wise, I think every team has a different ritual. Some would have regular grooming, etc., etc. Over the years, what I have learned is that many companies, their environment, their strategy, sorry, rather their environment keeps on changing. The context keeps on changing. So we should see if agile is working in that context or not, which is a bi-weekly, or sorry, fortnightly rhythm is working. How I operate is um, the team, of course, we work in a sprint and we have a set of tasks to do, but the discovery is ad hoc. So if I have a feature in mind, I will quickly spin it out in either wireframe, sketch out, and then share it with the team as a pre-read, and then the team, and then schedule a call later with them, right? And if need be, a couple of more calls. And that has really helped me over the time, not stuffing. I mean, what I'm trying to say is, I don't have a set process for this. It's more of an understanding that if the team is overloaded, they will shout it out. Otherwise, if I have a problem, I go to the team, ask them, they work with me, we spec it out, and that's it. Because there is, as you would know, when the management would ask you that, okay, for next quarter, is this possible? You need to do some level of discovery, right?
yeah.
And that's where the process starts to fail because the requests are coming in as a PM every day. And that's where you have to understand, okay, what level of information I need to share with my team in order to get a high level estimate of the complexity behind it. And that's how.
Yeah, that makes sense. Circling back to then the technical side of things, when you do these discoveries, or not just the high level ones, but then later on as well, that's the you take the opportunity to discuss the technical side as well and discover basically your knowledge gaps as well, I assume, as you move along.
Yeah. So like it again depends on the context, like how pressed I am for time.
Yeah.
Right? Which is, for example, I kid you not, there will be days when the CEO will ask you, your boss, and your boss will ask you, and within like few hours you need to come out with, say, okay, can we do it or not? In those times I really take a very proactive attitude, which is I would get in touch with the most knowledgeable person on this, get on a call, just did it last week, hash it out, and then know what are the exact gaps. Where I'm not so much pressed for the time, I first would articulate my thoughts into a simple wireframe, and then share it with the team, and then get on a call. And the team will ask me first product related questions, and then I would ask, okay, what is the complexity? And see, my role right now is to figure out if the estimates are high, it is a signal of underneath complexity. And what I try to understand is what is that complexity, which then can become a bit technical.
Yeah.
And then understand, okay, what if I don't handle this complexity? What will be the impact on the product? And can I live with it?
Yeah.
Can I live with that trade-off? So it's all about making trade-offs. And that's where having these conversations help.
That makes a lot of sense. What I'm taking away from this as well is that, even though you have that technical background and exposure and experience, and you know your product very well, there's obviously a lot that you don't know in depth.
Oh yeah.
Right? A lot. And so the communication that you're doing
Yeah.
is actually to uncover those gaps, and there will
Yeah.
always be things you don't know. So communication skills for you as a PM, even more critical in this case.
So in this, a pro tip for anyone who wants to be a PM who's there, QA should be your best friend. Like QA should be your best friend, right? And especially if the QA has been in your company or worked with the product for a long time. No one can beat or match their knowledge. They are like your chat GPT. Like there is, I kid you not,
Okay.
this is this QA in my team for 4 or 5 years. There is this whole module about shipment that I have no idea. I just took it over last year. But as you mentioned, exactly that happens. Requirements comes in, I don't know what to do. I don't know even the domain knowledge. But then I rely on someone to help me walk through it quickly.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah.
You should know someone who you can talk to.
Okay, that's useful. Make friends with your QA is definitely a good tip. Clearly, outside of technical skills, there's a lot that we need to build on in order to complete the picture to becoming a PM. So, Yongni, would really love to hear from you. You are currently deputy director at GIG as well, and your background is as application consultant. And surely you also, when you transition more into product, had to learn new skills. What are those? And how did you overcome that?
Yeah, so for us, when we were doing like transiting from project to product, so one of the things that is very important is really like what Scott mentioned just now. You have your user, you have your tech, and then you have your business. So while we are very, very good at tech, but then the other area that we want to look at is really from a business perspective, how viable it is, and as also to look at the user needs. So these are the two key areas that which was lacking. Like for example, we need to understand, what are the pain points of the users, what are the things that what the users want, and looking at it from the other perspective is that how then can I suss out this information from the users? So like through interviews, through polls and all. With that, the data that we get, then from there we get the insights out of it. So that was the area that coming from more tech, we only focus on the delivery. We only focus on looking at it to say that, hey, when I deliver, as long as I get the budget, I deliver, that's enough. But that's not the way for product, because ultimately you need to look at it from the perspective that, it could be a long run. It's not like, okay, I finished it, then that's it. Yeah, so you need to constantly look at new features. What are the things that we want to build on it as well? So from a business perspective, it's also the viability. Like, okay, so if you were to charge the customer this, then what are they getting out of it? And then, how then do we move on to say that, constantly when we add in new features? Yeah, so that was the part that was lacking when I transited. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you mentioned a very important point, that project to product mindset switch that needs to happen kind of early on. That can sometimes, when you have that background, project management can sometimes be a tough transition.
Correct, yeah.
any tips from your personal experience on how you managed to really overcome this, or which sources you used in order to upskill?
Yeah, to overcome that is really just do it. It's like on the job training, and then we do it. Yeah, yeah, there's no hard and fast rule. Yeah.
On the job exposure,
Yes,
yeah.
yeah.
Any examples that you recall where really the penny dropped or that made a big difference for you?
Yeah, so when we were given one project, right? So, I mean, the very first thing that the team looked at was more that, okay, let's do it. But then there was this gap that we don't have that product mindset. So that's where we went into looking at, what are the trainings that are required. And yeah, so in fact, for my whole team, we actually went for training at ISS lah. So that's where we actually sent them for service design. Yes, Felicitas is here. Yeah. So we make them go through, be it from a technical team, our solution architect, our product managers. Yeah, so everybody had to go through it so that we all speak the same language. Yeah, so that was important for us. Yeah.
So a very systematic approach,
Yes,
basically.
yes,
And
yeah.
also for you, so not just
Yeah.
for you personally, but also for you as a manager, it's a scalable
Yes,
way
yeah.
for your team.
Correct,
Okay.
yeah.
Any other resources that you use also in your daily, let's say, that help you sometimes communicate better in the team or overcome those gaps as you gel the team together?
Yeah, so I mean, if you're talking about tools and all, of course, you have your Jira, Confluence, and all that actually help you document, what's your product backlog and all the information, so that at least everybody is aligned and where we are. Then, of course, the daily stand-ups that we have, lah. Yeah.
Okay. Switching sides a little bit, Scott, over to you, which is you represent basically our non-technical background product manager of the panel. Your background, as you mentioned earlier, you have a lot of product management experience in fintech, in healthcare, and insurance, but originally started as a product marketer and strategy analyst. So you are what we would commonly call from the business side, sort of.
Right.
And that's where you're coming in. You are from the business side. So curious to hear from you, which challenges were you facing as a so-called non-technical PM?
This question reminds me of a discussion I had with my friend before, right? She said like, oh, if you're like she categorized technical people as wizards, non-technical people as muggles. So I'm speaking for the muggles here, I guess, in a way. But so going to your question, what I thought was the biggest challenge is how do you gain the confidence and the trust of your engineering and development teams? That is the biggest hurdle for a non-technical product manager to overcome, right? I think that speaks to what AJ and Lee Sun mentioned earlier, right? How do you gain trust? And so what I thought was a very effective way to do that is to think about what is it that I can bring to the table, first of all. And what I know, what I'm very confident is that I bring the most granular view of a customer understanding to my development teams and my engineers, right? That is something that I can double down on as maybe a non-technical product manager in order to focus and bring their confidence. I provide you the single source of truth for that, and then you can just depend on me and rely on me for that. Now, that then connects to technical skills that you have to develop actually based on that. Because in order for you to have a more granular understanding of your customer, what do you need? You need to have data skills at the very least. That should be the baseline. You need to understand how to read analytics funnels, how to potentially run experiments or A/B tests, and uh, even later on when we get more advanced, and like what Lee Sun also mentioned, sometimes you don't have a data analyst that you always have on hand. So you have to learn how to read, how to write SQL scripts, for example, in order to extract data from the database, right? That's something that I had to do as a product manager. So I guess I had to upskill at least from that lens in order to gain the confidence and to double down on that, being the owner of customer understanding for my development teams. Yeah.
I think, yeah, you gave us sort of the top level concept, right? I need to be able to understand my customer, and for that I need to know data. And then you mentioned a very specific skill, which is SQL. Right? I also had to learn it when I started, but I'm not sure it still applies because it was so long ago, and it makes me think that how can someone who tries to really break in from zero into product management even know where to start or what to learn?
Yeah. So that also, I think, touches on a very good point, which is when you want to gain trust of your development teams, you want to speak the same language as well. So actually, the way how I got started, I'm very tempted to say take an ISS course, like what Youngni mentioned, but actually, there's a lot of very good free resources, right? That's where I got started. So, for example, at the very start of my product management journey, I took the CS50, the Harvard online course, this computer science, in order for me to gain the confidence. Like, I want to be able to peer under the hood. What is it really that these development teams are talking about when they say back end, when they say algorithms and all that? What does it really mean? So I had to understand all of that from that lens. And then there's also a lot of very good resources. For example, I follow this Substack newsletter called technical.ly, technically. And it does a very good job demystifying some of the more technical terms, like what is a container, what is an API, right? So at least being able to speak the language, it already helps a lot as well. So that's how that's the direction upon which I upskilled myself, aside from the data part as well. So yeah, I guess that's the one of the ways that we can cover that part.
Great. Those are like two very concrete resources that we can look at Substack, as well as any online course, basically, or CS50 that you just recommended as well. Where do you guys see? I'm curious the role of your engineering manager or software developers as well in educating you, maybe especially Scott. Like if you come in from zero, like what was that relationship like? And yeah, you said you want to build confidence, so it's tough, of course, to
Yeah.
feel like you know nothing, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. So I think there are three categories when we talk about technical skills, right? We cover the data part. We also cover the part about speaking the language, understanding the tech stack. I think there's also a third part, which is understanding effort and what does it take to build something from a team perspective. And going to in response to your question, that's where I thought was the biggest adjustment I had to make, which is I had to be very close to my engineering lead. I had to work very closely with them. I had to gain his trust in order for in order for me to be comfortable to ask some of the quote unquote like dumb questions to him. To say like, hey, like what the example that you mentioned, like we have a management meeting that wants to estimate the timeline for this project. So I have to quickly do that. So I can only do that with the trust of the engineering lead that I was working very closely with. So yeah, that I think that's one of the other tips. Like you be best friend not just with a QA but also with your your engineering leads, especially if you're just starting out, because that partnership is crucial. And I learned a lot about the technical skills through that collaboration with my engineering lead. Yeah.
Earlier, I was asking AJ about the downside of being technical. So let me also ask you the inverse, right? Is there any upside to being a blank slate when it comes to technical?
Right. So I want to make a very clear distinction here, which is I don't really believe in the binary distinction between non-technical and technical, right? It's not a black and white. I earlier made reference to Muggle versus Wizard, but in reality, I don't really believe or subscribe to that idea. For me, technical and non-technical, it's a spectrum, right? So if I were to evaluate myself now, should I classify myself as technical now that I learned a lot of these concepts? Uh, or what about somebody who took up computer science, but then they never practiced product management? Is that person technical or non-technical? So really, it's a spectrum. It's a spectrum, right? And going back to, sorry, your question was about
The upside of being
the upside,
non-technical.
right? So I would say, so having said that, I would say that given that my starting point is still more from a non-technical background, I would say that maybe the starting point by which I view problems is always coming from the side of how do I solve a user need, or how do I solve a business need with this problem? So that is my default mode, right? That is my default starting point, which is helpful because then I guess from my experience, right, we don't have to go into the overall solutioning and waste a lot of effort even before we assess that, the user need part and the business viability part. So I think that part is helpful. But overall, I would say like more knowledge is always better, right? So the more knowledge that I now have about the technical side, that can only be more helpful for me, right? And I think one of the key themes that is also emerging here is that uh, learning how to learn is a very useful skill, right? Learning about like the curiosity part, because all these tools keep changing. So the more we learn about all these skills and techniques, that is only helpful. And I think coming from a non-technical background, that I always have this handicap, I would say. Like I always see myself as, okay, I'm more handicapped, therefore I have to overcompensate on the learning part. So that becomes an advantage instead of a disadvantage. Yeah.
Very good summary, and really great, that you don't subscribe to that like separation of non-technical and technical, which I think is very daunting for many who want to get in the field. AJ, you wanna build on that?
Just want to add on to this, right? Which is the original question you asked, which is what does a non-technical person need to learn in order to what resources, whatever they need to do in order to uh, do this job better, I guess that's probably the question, right? Although I started with a technical background, I have mentored a couple of PMs who were non-technical to begin with, right? So, I mean, in today's world, the one answer, of course, to this is ChatGPT. I kid you not, like you can just sit down and ask it to dumb it down for you, right? Explain it to me like 5 years old, and they are doing the heavy lifting. The artificial intelligence is doing the heavy lifting. You don't need to go through 5 articles to kind of understand. It's a sparring buddy for you, and you keep on asking. It will. I personally have used it to learn new things that I didn't know about, right? So that's that. Second is, of course, relationship or trust. So, and expanding on that, I think enough has been said. The most important skill a non-technical person, or rather any PM, should always have is being curious, right? Which Scott mentioned. So breaking it down is, if you're in a situation where you enter a conversation and a lot of technical jargons are being used and you have like world is falling apart, that's the feeling, like I have no idea what am I doing here, I'm supposed to lead the team, I don't even know what they're talking about, and you take a backseat, right? What you can do is first humanize and be empathetic to yourself, saying this is completely okay, I don't know. And as a PM, you are always ready to be playing in outside your comfort zone. So if you want to be comfortable, don't come into this role, right? So if you want to play outside your comfort zone, this is the role, and you take a backseat and you humanize. Then second thing is just break it down. So start with small. So I think he mentioned earlier, which is um, problem solving, right? So the basic problem solving 101 skill is divide and conquer, right? So if a lot of technical jargons are being thrown at you, you start with small. Can you explain me this? What does it mean? Okay, can you explain it to me like I'm a 5-year-old? And if the person is not able to explain it to you, they have two problems. Either the communication, they don't know how to communicate, or they don't know it themselves, right? And so that's what I'm saying, like, which is what you need to master is your relationship and communication. So if someone is struggling to communicate that technical concept to you, if you have good communication skills, you can bridge that gap for them. And that's where the visualization, breaking it down step by step, you write down the terms, etc., etc. And trust me, it's just like I've seen those PMs who struggled initially and how panicky they were, but in a month and after 2 months, they like completely changed. Like you could just see the level of confidence that has gone up. So I think this is like really important to consider.
Yeah, that's it. It's not just your responsibility, right? And you can always leverage the rest
Yeah.
of your team, and you should,
Yeah,
because
you
they're the
should.
experts, and they
Yeah.
should be able to explain this to
What I
you.
always tell PMs is don't spoon feed.
Yeah.
Don't spoon feed. If you're spoon feeding, this is not, you will never be able to scale. Like, I mean, as you will grow, you will get more responsibilities. And if you start spoon feeding for each and every responsibility or every product area that you're responsible for, you can only do so much. You only have 24 hours, you only have one brain.
That's true. Anything to add from your side, Lisa?
Yeah, I think the part that AJ mentioned about humanizing is quite important. I think he said it's okay to tell yourself that you don't know everything, right? So it's okay to be honest with your team that what areas are you strong in? Like Scott was saying, you can double down on me for business needs and user needs. I'll settle that for you. But this is where I need help from you guys. It's okay to say that and let the team know that is what kind of help you need. And I think with an earnest attitude like that and that curiosity, right, I think people are quite willing to help you. And at the same time, it gives them quite a bit of ownership over what they're doing also. So that kind of becomes a strength for you.
So be curious, ask questions, right? Anything else? Oh yeah, you please add on.
Yeah, just one example. I remember one manager that I know. So she doesn't come from a technical background, but she has a curious mind, very inquisitive. So she will actually go down into the little details from a technical angle so that she wants to understand. So she will get the technical team to sit down with her to explain. And till today, she's really very, very good technically, although she does not come from a technical background. So it's really like you need to ask, you need to probe, and then with the curious mind, then you get your answers, and then you can work very closely with your technical team as well. Yeah.
And you will build that knowledge over time, right? The
Yes, yeah,
relevant
and
knowledge.
yeah,
let's
so
say.
it's not necessary that you need to have a good technical background to be a product manager. So even if you don't come from a technical background, you can still be an effective product manager to work with the whole product team lah. Yeah.
Yeah. That's a very great point. For maybe Scott, let's check on the Q&A for a second. I don't know if you all have submitted already, but if you have any questions, please use the QR code, and based on that, we'll see where we are.
Okay, just a reminder to everyone, you can also upvote the questions as well, which have been submitted over there. Let's see. One of the more upvoted ones is, I am a new product manager and do not have any technical background or experience. So what are the panel's recommendation for me? Will this be different from the commercial sector and the public sector? Yeah.
Different between, yeah. Maybe, Lisa, how do you feel about that question? You have experience on both sides of the house.
Sure, I'll start. I can speak on at least from a GovTech perspective, right? Like new PMs are usually, in terms of, usually we would, the grading wise, right? They are usually called associate PMs, associate product managers, right? And for GovTech, I don't really think we are looking to hire at this level. What we want is usually a PM that has some experience already and has gone through, some battles, some wars, and kind of knows what they're doing. At least that's from a GovTech perspective. But from a public sector perspective, maybe that answer is slightly different. Commercially, though, I've spoken to different people also who are looking for jobs in product management, and I see a common trend in that it is very hard to get in this field, depending on where you come from. It could be that you're a designer, could be that you're an engineer trying to be a product manager, and all of them have expressed similar, frustrations, whether it be commercial or public sector, about breaking in. So, AJ or Yongni, do you have any advice for them in terms of how to start?
The experience to how to start. I like what I mentioned before is really like, if you have an opportunity, don't people to ask for the opportunity if you're in the same organization, to allow ask your boss, or or if there's any opportunity that is out there that you can actually start. Then of course, on the job training, these are some of the things that can allow you to pick up that skill set lah. Yeah.
Just to get the question right, which is, how do I break into product management? This is the kind of question.
I think it was especially with regards to technical skills, right?
Not having the person doesn't have technical background.
Okay, okay. So I can't draw from my own experience because when I was looking out at that time, product management as a role was very new. So it was like more like throwing different, applying for different roles and apply and pray, right? In today's world, what I would advise is network. And the key to network is finding mentors, right? And nowadays, a lot of mentorship programs, portals, free paid mentorships have opened up, which when you get a mentorship from a PM and understand the nuances, you can talk about your daily job experience if you're a developer or a designer, and how can you start now looking your day-to-day activity from a product lens. And once you build that relationship with a PM, that PM themselves will open doors of opportunity for you via their networks, right? They will connect you with different people. And all you need is just a foot in the door, which is network, join groups, join these groups, and there will always be a, I think the market right now is definitely not great, but eventually it will recover, and then there will be roles for junior PM or associate PM. And that's where the network will help you, because you will get that foot in the door because someone who knows someone knows you. So that would be my biggest takeaway if you want to break that, like in today's world, because there's now a lot of applications for PM.
Scott, from your side, the non-technical side, how did you get started in product management? Is there anything else you would add to?
I think product management, especially for those who are early into the role, you don't really get, there's no set pathway into it. Most of the people that I speak to, we stumble into product management. So in my case, like what you mentioned, I come from like strategy consulting background, and then eventually move into product marketing. And then what I realized when I was doing product management later on, is that what I did when I was doing product marketing, a lot of it was already kind of product management. Because what I was doing was I was monitoring the data in the funnel. I was trying to find ways to increase usage and to drive retention and to increase user acquisition. So a lot of these are already about driving outcomes for the product. Again, like going back to how do you break into product management as a non-technical individual? What you have to double down on is uh, what was your background in the past, and how do you strengthen that? So there's you can think of one way of addressing it is looking at covering your weaknesses, but another way is double down on what you're already strong at, because then that's how you can really gain the trust of your team in a much faster way. Yeah.
I think super important point, because there's a lot of different parts of companies, different departments, different industries who have gone through so much through digital transformation that the role itself now, whether you're in operations or in marketing, requires you to operate a lot of technology and tools. So you're exposed, actually. You are the user oftentimes, and you're
Yeah.
thinking about it. You're thinking, how would I improve this, right? So you do get that exposure, whether you know that you're thinking about product management or you're applying product thinking or not, right?
Yeah.
So that's what you need to focus on and strengthen and market yourself with as well, if you apply to a product role and if you want to build those skills. Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good point. That's true. There's a lot of adjacent roles there.
So that I think is a good segue to the next question, which is about adjacent roles.
Yeah. Yeah,
Right.
go
So
ahead. Yeah.
one of the most upvoted question right now is: does product manager double hat as Scrum Master at times? And I think a related question here is: what is the difference between a product manager and an ops tech manager? Okay. So
Starting with the Scrum Master one, I do want to focus on the technical aspect. So I'm sure you asked because you feel that Scrum Master is also a role in a tech team. So, how much does it really overlap, especially in focus on technical aspects, perhaps? Any opinions from the panel? Anyone wants to start?
I mean, first of all, I don't see any Scrum Master roles nowadays. It used to be like 3-4 years ago, right? I think Scrum Master's role originated from the fact that if the team was like the Hobbits, Scrum Master was like the Gandalf, right? Like shepherding the team through the problems, keeping their sanity intact, facilitating retrospective, which used to be the went out session, et cetera, et cetera. I think, so I would say nowadays Scrum Master role doesn't exist that much. At least that's what I have seen. So I would say as a PM, the innate qualities are still there because you need to de facto lead the team, hold the team together. You are responsible for their mental health directly. You are responsible for making sure that, yes, everyone is pushing their limit, but they are not breaking down, right? So in that sense, maybe as a junior PM, you do not need to, but as you grow in the seniority, there are certain level of people responsibility that comes over, even if you're not directly managing them, right? So that's my opinion of product manager versus a scrum master role, right? I mean, you need to absorb that skill. I think the second question is about a tech manager or rather an engineering
Ops
manager.
tech manager, which I believe is a role a bit more common on the government side of things.
Okay.
Are you familiar with it?
I don't know what an ops tech manager is.
I mean, I maybe Yongni can touch on the ops tech, but I can answer about the Scrum Master part for beforehand, right? I believe like you were saying, you don't hire for a Scrum Master, right? It is an agile role basically, and but in a team, right, who is best suited to perform the Scrum Master role? Is it the product manager, or is it the tech lead, or is it a BA, a business analyst, or someone like that? Or is there another person who actually leads, I guess, the engineering team I guess, from an operational angle, right? Ideally, this person is not the product manager because the product manager has to drive other kinds of outcomes, delivery of the work that needs to be done, right? In terms of a very agile model where you have goals, milestones to complete, those are very, how do you say, tech in mind, or in government terms, we call it delivery sometimes, basically delivering the outcomes that are required. So ideally, this role is not performed by the product manager. Of course, within a small team, right? If you within a small team, there's sometimes no choice, right? Because product manager is always the jack of all trades. You bao ka liao, you grab all the good stuff at the end, right? And so, in a small team, maybe you play a more tactical role. And so it is in your interest, as AJ said, that you have to do some of these things to ensure execution excellence, ensure mental well-being, and all that. But of course, as you progress through your career, right, you become more strategic. You think about bigger picture. You want to plan things more. You might leave some of these details to people who are better in these roles. Yeah. Anything to add, Yongni?
So from the ops tech, more coming from my own team lah. In the past, what we did was that we actually segregated to say that, okay, so if you are doing the development work, then you pass on to the operations team, for example. Then that creates a divide that people would tend to think that, hey, you're doing the sexy thing of development and then you hand over to the operations team. So coming from so that mindset had to be changed lah, to say that we look at it from a product end to end, from your conceptualization all the way to the delivery and the operations. So we actually integrated them together within our own team. Then for that product, so that whole team will handle it end to end. So that way, at least they will appreciate and they will understand that the problem created during development is not a problem at operation side at the later stage. So at least they will be able to see it from the end-to-end perspective lah. So that was something that we actually make a bold change to make that change lah. Yeah.
The first one, right?
Do we want to cover this about the project?
Sure.
Okay, so there's one question which is also upvoted, which is my organization still takes a project lens on work. What's the difference between a project lens versus a product lens? Okay. All right, this is a kind of the bread and butter of what we teach, right? So maybe I can get started on this question. So when we talk about project lens, right? Remember the presentation we shared earlier, which is product is about driving outcomes, right? And project management traditionally has been about driving outputs, right? So it's about the difference between outcomes and outputs, right? Project management is about, okay, you complete an output, you deliver, and you're done. You can wash your hands, you can move to maybe the next project, and then you can deliver it again from shepherd it from A to B, and then you're done. For product, it's a bit more complex because you're ultimately measured based on the outcome that you drive. So the outcome should be tied to a business or user outcome, right? We talk about user satisfaction. We talk about revenue. We talk about increasing usage, retention, or acquisition, right? So we have to think about things from a broader lens. So it's like we care less about how we get there, but more about driving getting to the destination, right? Which is the outcome. So what that means then is that the way we look at developing our products have to change. It's not about delivering feature A, B, and C, right? Which is more of a project mindset. It's about looking at things from the end in mind and saying, okay, this is the metric we have to drive. What is a way for us to drive that? Is it about building a solution? Is it about driving this feature? Or can we just add, let's say, maybe a emailer mechanism to the app, right? There are many different ways to skin the cat. So that's taking the product mindset. The other thing about product mindset is the continuity, right? Because there's no end with product. There's no end point. It's about continuous improvement. It's about driving change in order for you to keep reaching those metrics and those outcomes. So that will be the key difference, I would say, between project and the product approach at work. And anything else for the panel to add on that?
I think Yongni already earlier said very similar direction of things. Yeah.
I mean, having worked in Southeast Asia exclusively, I think Singapore actually, for all of my working career, how I have seen product management shaping out is this product versus project is, I mean, if in a Venn diagram, product is like this, project is a subset, right? So, and I think I've shared this before, which is when you're starting out in your journey as a product manager, especially at a very starting level, output delivery is also very important, because at the end of the day, if it doesn't get shipped, it doesn't get measured, and you can think of all the beautiful ideas in the world, but if you're not able to deliver it, you wouldn't know, right? So it's very important. The project is also very important in order for that happen. But what happens is that when you start slowly uh, improve your project skills or muscle memory, then that's where you need to now put on the strategic hat of also, okay, I'm able to solve these small problems. What is the bigger opportunity space that I should be focusing on? And as you move up, people would be looking to you to say, okay, what should be the next opportunity space that we should be working on? So I think a project is a subset of product.
I think that's a good point, and I think dictionary answer plus some additions definitely make sense to me. I can add on a little bit, right? In terms of a project, right, you always want to work towards a certain goal, right? Output A, B, C. But what happens after you reach output A? In a project that ends there, right? Because you're done. But then from a product perspective, you want to think about other things. For example, what strategy are you using to launch it to users? What channels are you reaching out to them from? What's your marketing strategy? How are you going to position this? What kind of pricing model are you going to think about? So there's kind of this go-to-market. It's basically a category of skills called product go-to-market, where you have to think about what happens after you finish the delivery. And there's basically, I've just listed 4 or 5, right? There's actually perhaps more. So those are areas you want to think about as well. Another area which is also important, like we call it the product lifecycle management, right? Which is after you launch a product, and then now people start to use it, and then you get the numbers. Numbers start coming in, right? You kind of know, okay, adoptions at this, retention, what's drop-off rate and all that. And then you want to use those numbers and then feed back in again right to the start. That's where you collect your user data again, right? And that's where you start to see what are the opportunity areas again, as mentioned by AJ also. And then that's where you see, okay, what's next? What best drives the outcome that I want to achieve? Is it feature A, B, or C? And then you do your assessment and all that, and then you keep doing this basically until the business decides that this is not viable, or it's time to pivot, or time to kill the product. Yeah.
There's one more question that also hints at roles and also in the technical context. So maybe let's take a look at this one. Do you think it's beneficial to split a business type PM from a technical PM role? Versus a non-T PM role.
I think it depends on the type of product, right? Which is how complex the product is. So I think in the starting, Doro, you had asked, right? Like, okay, where would be a product where having technical skills would make a lot more sense? So the domain that I know the most is payment. So the payment world is very, very technical and complex, right? The different systems talking to each other, basically. So depending on the size of the product scope, sometimes it would make sense that a TPM is like completely leading the integrations part of the product, and the other PM is actually thinking of partnerships and the adoption, and then figuring out, okay, which should be the next partnership that I should be doing. I mean, that's the only one of the use case that comes to my mind where you would want to separate out, or rather you would need to have a business or user focused PM and then a TPM on the same side. But essentially, sometimes I feel like that TPM then can be a replacement for an engineering lead, you know? So yeah, that's what my thoughts are.
Good point, yeah.
I mean, I agree with AJ also. It really depends on the scale of your product and what stage your product maturity is at. Usually at the starting to midway, you usually want one person's neck to choke. Uh, that's a very common analogy that is being used, right? And and really, it's because you want this person to drive the success and have one person say, right? But yes, correct. As the product matures, reaches saturation, you may want to have specific roles for different things to marketing engagement or yeah, more technical facing role. Yeah, I agree with that too.
Is the technical PM role more suitable or more attractive for those with a developer background, you think? Is that something to look for?
Yeah, why not? Possible. Really would depend on what they want to focus on in terms of their career and preference. Yeah.
Anything from you to add, Yomi? Then we'll, already last question for you for all of the panelists. Curious to hear from you. How do you think the skills, maybe the technical skills specifically, but skills overall, needed for product managers might change in the next couple of years? Yeah, how will they change?
Since I'm holding the mic, I mean, AI, we talk about it a lot and has been, I think AI will definitely change the way products are built right now, which is the complexities that we couldn't solve right now. So for example, I can share a use case from Zalora, right? Which is, I mean, think of the search, how you are right now trying to describe that, okay, I want a blue jeans, and how AI can probably take this to the next level is that I'm going on a beach vacation, and the search result kind of caters to that, right? So I think this technology is changing the way, the imagination rather, of how to bring value to the customers. Right now, I think in today's world, we are thinking of bringing 1x, 2x value. With this new technology, it might allow you or enable you to bring 5x or 10x value, which customers would be like mind blown, like I had never thought about this. And that's where the innovation is gonna come. I think that, of course, then makes it important for the PM to be able to understand this technology's capability, rather not go into too much technical detail, but rather understand what the capabilities are and what the future is looking at, and being able to either get a buy-in from the organization or lead effort to kind of, or get their team to play with it as a POC or something to evolve with that.
Are you talking AI specifically?
Yeah, AI, yeah. So I think that is definitely gonna change the way working, and I think it's also gonna change the way internal operations are being run, right? Which means one of the most boring part of my job is writing user stories. Right, I've been doing that for 5 years, and I think sometimes I wish someone else can do it, but we cannot hire because of the budget constraints. Now here comes in this new technology, wherein if it's trained on Zalora's context, i.e. the business logic and whatnot, my productivity has become suddenly 2x or 3x, right? So I think that for me is definitely how world is evolving. I see the role that it plays into product management.
So both on the level of AI is going to supercharge everyone's
Even the
product. So
data
we need to
analysis, right?
know. Yeah,
Like
yeah.
the amount of effort SQL, we have to learn SQL how to route. Now you don't need to.
Right.
You don't need to.
Right, right. So
Right.
yeah, yeah, exactly. So both on the level of how can I leverage AI for my product as well as for my personal productivity or my personal product management
Yeah.
capacity, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, AI.
I mean, honestly, I was very skeptical in the starting when it came out, and I was like, "This is just the Web3 fad, right? Everyone is talking about it, but there's no something." But over the time, when I actually started playing with it, and like, okay, wow, okay, wait a minute, this is something different, right? So yeah, and I think I'll be honest, like the way the other part of non-technical part of how the world is evolving, how product management would change would be given the macro environment condition. I think in the next 1 to 2 years, there will be ruthless focus on value and wastage, which is the appetite to waste is way too low, which means you have to be very efficient and very confident in the bets that you are placing. And that for that, you would have to do a lot of homework in order to place that high confident bet, because organizations' appetite to place bets which might not pan out has decreased a lot. I think in the next 1 to 2 years, that's definitely going to happen. And as a PM, that onus lies on you, which is you work on a product or a feature and it doesn't deliver value back to back. Uh, Companies then, I don't want to say it, but I think you are getting it. Yeah.
I mean, I agree with what AJ has mentioned also, like, and the technology climate is a bit different and we have to adapt to that. However, may I offer another point of view also, right? That if you think about it, we are asking how, how will the role and what kind of skill sets are involved for product manager will change in the next 5 years. Think about how has the role changed in the last 5 years, in the last 10 years, actually. And while it is true we can apply new skills and new technology to the work that a product manager does, right? If you think about it, 10 years ago, a product manager may be called a product manager then, or maybe a project manager, or a business manager, right? The role essentially hasn't changed for maybe 20 years or even 50 years. All you're trying to do is deliver value by delivering outcomes. So perhaps in the past, you would be called a business manager. You would still be talking to your customers, your users. You would still want to know what's their problem. You would still want to sell them or provide them a service that they like and they use, right? And those gives you like basically your revenue and your stats and everything. So that's food for thought.
I just want to build on what Lee Soon mentioned about the evolution of the product management role. And I think you made a very good point that the function about delivering value through delivering outcomes, that will always be there. So again, like the message earlier was, we don't want to get too hung up on the role itself, product manager. It may be called by a different name a few years from now, like 5 years from now, it may be called something else. But there's always that that function will always be needed, right? So when like what AJ also mentioned, like with the influx of these AI tools, we can see that maybe some of the people who used to do development, they will have to look bigger picture. Then they might have to transition more into like the product kind of skill set, which means like it seems to me that all these different roles, one of them is that it will be more fragmented, and the other is that it will converge towards that, because that is the thing that cannot be replaced by these AI tools, which is how do you deliver value, how do you deliver outcomes. That will always be there. The tools will continue to change. So that, I think, is what we can keep focusing on. The other thing about I was also thinking about the impact of AI itself into product management, right? And AI, like ChatGPT, is very good at writing like user stories, actually. So then, like that. So I tell that to my, yeah, not yet, but I think for the more generic ones, it's pretty okay. Uh, and we know that it will continue to improve, right? So it means that the skill set that we need may not be there anymore. We need to think about what are the other skill sets, less tactical, more strategic, right? And what this means also with the influx of AI is that the amount of time it takes to build products will compress. We will have more rapid iterations of products. Used to be it takes like 5 years to build a software. Then it became 5 months, and then 5 weeks. And now with these tools, it can be 5 days. And then the teams also become smaller. Used to be 5,000 people, 500, 5, maybe now just 0.5. Like part-time, you can do it, right? Just with half the time. So all of these, what does that mean in terms of skills, right? It means you have to be really on the ball with the outcomes that you want to drive, because when even with all these quick iterations, you still have to have that skill set of build, measure, learn, and then adapt that to the outcomes to the business and the user that you want to drive. Yeah.
Do the changes in technology make it more accessible for people to become product managers as well? Easier or harder?
The barrier to entry, I would say, could be lower, right? Because, but at the same time, it will become more competitive as well, right? Because, like I said, if the development teams will focus less on the actual day-to-day work, because now the tools can do that for them, then they will converge to more of a product role, right? Which is looking at the outcome and the value, which means um, as product managers, we have to keep learning and evolving our skills as well, so that we can ward off the competition, the influx of competition that will increase. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Sorry, just this thing came to my mind when I was hearing all of this, and I think my what hit me right now when I'm listening all of this is that how it will evolve, in my opinion, is that, and we know not all PM's role are that product oriented, right? Different companies have different requirement, as you mentioned. So what I see is reduction in delivery or output focused PM roles and more focus on value PM roles, right? Which can who can actually move the numbers, or who knows a path, who can chart out a path to move numbers. Being able to deliver on time, which is celebrated a lot, will not be that important anymore, right? What will become important is, okay, were we able to move the number or not? I think that change is definitely coming now.
Value regardless of tools and regardless of the scope, right? And any final words from you, Yongni, on this topic?
No, not really. But just from a product manager's perspective, I mean, technology will always change. Then how then do you upskill yourself, and how then do you like constantly look at the various technologies that are up there? So I mean, from that perspective, is really reading up, having it from all your conferences and all that you could possibly attend to pick up some of all this. Yep, that's all.
Like remain cognizant, look out there, and
Yes,
and
yeah.
engage, right?
Yep,
Actively engage. Great. That some very interesting points from everyone to see how things were going to evolve in the next couple of years. Thank you, everyone. Thanks on the panel for your sharing your experiences with us, and thanks to the audience for attending and asking your great questions. Before we move upstairs for snacks and drinks, please help us scan the QR codes to give us some feedback on our event, on the panel, on the questions. And just pointing out that if you're a public service officer, it's the right-hand side code. Otherwise, it's the left-hand side.